Welcome to the next big thing, the 2469 Community Podcast. Joining us today, we have Eason, founder of Crowdstirr; Ahmad Mansoor, founder and CEO of Cognitive Technologies; Mehboob Raza, lead data engineer of Ahoy; and Addo Smajic, co-founder and CEO of Source Network.
Welcome to the next big thing. I want to start off with a discussion about AI, and then over from there, I would like to dive into business intelligence. So it seems like we have a lot of interest in those two technologies, I think just in general, but also within the group. So anybody want to start?
Well, how does everyone feel about all the hype in AI would be my first thought. Do you think it's all overhyped, or is something real going to come out of it?
Yeah, I think it's extremely overhyped.
Yeah?
Yeah, very, very extremely overhyped, because people think that AI is going to take over the world, the keyword. But I see many cases, AI is not even able to close the doors, properly. Yeah. So how it's going to take over the world,
Yeah,
you
definitely.
Get my point?
Yeah, like people like to paint a picture of like these doomsday scenarios that it's going to be capable of doing everything in the next few years. But my favorite kind of reference to it is that Tesla's been saying they're going to have autonomous driving cars since like 2014, and it's like almost 2024, and they still don't have one. So it's like there's this like constant hype of things, and materialization of it takes much longer than that.
Again, I definitely agree to that. I think it's overhyped, but at the same time, something could come out of it. My perspective is that I believe that the actual data that it actually needs to I guess make decisions and perform the way people actually expect it is actually not there. So if you try to create like a solution, if that solution doesn't have the right data in your data warehouse, and you're trying to run AI against it, it's only going to be able to make suggestions or decisions or whatever you're doing with the data models based off the data set that it actually has. So that's my 2 cents on it.
And I think it's more of business and take over the world. It's the more marketing thing, basically, to pitch in the products in the market, and it's all about the revenue. So that's the thing.
Gentlemen, sorry to bust your bubble.
Yeah.
I am working on building something towards general intelligence. AI will take over the world. This might come as a shocker to you, but not with the current methods that we have.
That is the point, though.
Yeah, that's the point, yeah. From
like, I'm not saying at some point we're not going to get to singularity and all that stuff, but like the way people talk about it now, it's almost like it is here. Where
I agree, it is overhyped. But people are not looking at what is it and on the back that's happening from a technical point of view.
The advancements are huge, and the only part that is concerning from my perspective is that there's maybe like 5 to 10 companies on the planet that can really kind of afford to build new AI.
Absolutely.
Like, do you have 4 or 5 models? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, that like pretty much every other startup that labels itself as an AI startup is built off of. The companies that can afford to train those models and build those new models, there's so few of them that stifles that. Innovation comes from democratized access to iterative processes, and so to have only engineers at like 5 companies be able to come up and devise new models and iterate on them, that is kind of slowing the process down of innovation, in my opinion.
Right. I think we can. You want to say?
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, think of it as the space race. There's only a handful of countries who are able to build the infrastructure, put in the resources to be able to travel to space and perform research there. So similarly, only a handful of companies, you could probably count them on one hand, and these companies will be able to put in the resources to build those massive data centers and research about how if we're even going to use silicon as the hardware for the type of chip fabrication that needs to be done to allow processing of more than petabytes of data to be able to build that kind of intelligence. So there are governments across the world who are interested in building an artificial intelligence agent that represents a country itself and the sovereignty of a country. There are these concepts. These concepts do exist, and it can be possible, but not immediately.
Okay.
I was going to add to that, two thoughts that I had is on one side, you mentioned how, governments would have the data of all the citizens and then they can build AIs or these companies. So what do you think? How do you feel about that? Just anyone getting access to your data without your consent and your permission. And then second is AI being trained by only a few companies means that it won't be able to take into account the cultural differences and beliefs and of different people around the world. And so, creating AI that can account for the way people in different regions of the world think, that's something that doesn't exist right now. It's pretty much just a Silicon Valley view of what AI can do. And so I was curious what you guys thought on those two fronts.
On the first front, I think being as a data engineer for several reasons in the industry, not only for AI, data access is very much restricted, across the world. We literally have to struggle to get the data, mainly in the US, Canada, and Europe. I've been working for some Canadian clients, and we needed some healthcare data for the analysis. And it was basically to save lives. The healthcare data to save lives, to analyze the cardiac arrest and all. You know how many people die due to cardiac arrest each year. So we needed that data to analyze, but we couldn't access that data due to all the laws, the privacy laws. So this has been the struggle which I've been facing a lot in any industry. The access to data, it's very much restricted, especially the healthcare data, and the data coming from your personal devices.
So do you think the concern was that once you have access to the data, then you can take ownership of that data and then do whatever you want with it afterwards?
No, not whatever, only to utilize it in the fruitful manner, like the healthcare data. We couldn't do the analysis of the cardiac arrest in a whole of Canada because we didn't have the access. But we had the tools, we had the right people, and we had all the analysis. We just needed the data to be in the picture to set all the pieces, and things would have been very good in the terms of assessing the cardiac arrest and avoiding that.
Got it.
To add on to that, what you mentioned, I think it's actually good that the data is restricted because I have concerns about that as well too. With everybody trying to plug into AI, and then we only have a few actual companies who actually have access to large amounts of data, they can actually do things with that data that we probably can't even begin to fathom, right now. And everybody's, plugging into it. Yeah. And there isn't any major regulatory bodies over AI in general. And I think Elon Musk is trying to drum up a storm on that even back in the U.S. So even though he has a hand in AI, he's constantly pressing the U.S. government to create a regulatory body to make sure that the direction that AI goes is just to serve its purpose, but not go into the whole take over the world type scenario. So.
Yeah, this is where, the data governance comes into picture. This plays a very critical role. So like each coin has two faces. So accessing it, I know there are many disadvantages if it falls into wrong hands, and people can, even the celebrity data is available in the Canada. So it's, you don't want random guys to call a celebrity, oh, how are you? They'll be like, where did you get my phone number? So I understand there are many disadvantages, but when, there are many advantages as well. Like I said, if you can save someone's life, I think it's about, if you're talking about life, if you can save someone's life, then I'm willing to take that risk, including that data governance is clubbed into that, and making sure that it's not leaked anywhere where it's not supposed to be there.
So do you think a better solution might be to let the citizens decide if they want to have the data accessible by these engines rather than aggregators, which be it governments or companies or whatnot, or hospitals?
What I think citizens should decide, but seeing the current standards in the world, citizens are not deciding actually. Their data is available. I am generating data. I am using my cell phone. Google knows about me more than I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's scary when you look at Google Maps and
I know.
it knows all of the stuff you've done.
Literally, we are
places
speaking.
you've
Literally, if we are speaking about this podcast, and there is a third person who doesn't know about this podcast, he goes home and he sees a notification. Oh, what's this notification? These guys were talking about this, and I'm seeing this notification.
Yeah.
So the freedom is already taken away. So if it's already taken away, so I would suggest wherever it is critical, then access to data should be granted. Considering the data governance for sure.
It always begs the question that who decides what's critical?
Right, and you mentioned 2 points. You said one of the points was how would any of us would personally feel about this. I am prone to, I'm against this. To be honest, I feel uncomfortable sharing a lot of my information. Growing up in the early 90s, we were told, we were advised to not have your real names as a part of your email address, so as not to give away your identity. This was a different sense of privacy that we have back then, and now it's very different. People don't care about uploading their images on the cloud. There's a lot that can be done about increasing awareness within society, within people, within users of information technology, about how, for example, the people use Snapchat, upload videos of themselves and let it stay in the cloud, or it can be used without caring about the terms of use and privacy policies of these companies. So I think that there just has been massive change or an increase in the consumption of information technology, and it wasn't let's just say organic. We didn't have the time to be prepared for this, except for some people who got into information technology early on. They were able to consume it slowly and grow with it, learn with it. People of my age, and late 80s, early 90s, that kind of stuff. And but consumers these days, they just take in everything that's being offered without wondering about the implications of their privacy being invaded.
Until something happens to them, and then they start.
And nothing crazy has happened yet, but they still don't. They wouldn't be aware of what could happen to them. For example, all the cloud videos, Snapchat is storing all of your information. They can generate facial landmarks, and maybe have a vectorized database of all of the information about a certain person's face, and they can cover the entire spectrum of data variants that can be incurred from this. For the different types of lighting, different how you're aging, right? How your facial structure is changing, with facial hair and all that. So because people use these applications, people upload their data over time. So it can also capture in all different types.
And people shouldn't be fooled by Snapchat saying that it's deleted, because it stays on their servers for 6 months after it disappears.
And I agree with that point. People are, it's sort of they're careless dealing with their data, because majority of the people, they think, okay, it won't happen to me until it happens. Okay.
So, I think people should care about whether or not this is important.
Yeah, to your point, it seems like older generations seem to care more about privacy. I'm a maxi when it comes to enabling self-sovereignty for people over all of their data. I know the technology is not there, but doesn't mean that we shouldn't just accept the status quo and not push the envelope towards getting to that level.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of my stance on the whole thing.
I'm going to get back to that point later.
Okay.
You want to say something?
Yeah, I actually kind of wanted to basically put something out there and then kind of see what y'all thoughts are on it. Y'all heard of problem, reaction, solution, right? I think the problem is uncontrolled and unregulated AI. I think the actual issue that would occur is if a major issue occurs with AI and then people react, hey, what can we do to prevent this from actually happening again? What could we do to get people to actually focus on solutions ahead of time before the problem actually happens? Or we can probably even plan to look at it differently, like baking in the solution into AI itself, so it actually can't occur, or at least mitigate an issue if it was to occur. What do y'all think about that?
I hope you're not referring to that blue bag carried by the founder of ChatGPT.
Sam is carrying a blue bag. It's become a trend these days.
Yeah.
So
So that's a great question, and it makes us ask another question about what is it that people refer to when they're talking about AI. Is AI a entity that lives across just like the internet, right? The internet is not conscious at the moment. The internet is based on multiple data centers and multiple. There's a whole infrastructure, right? Telecom companies have cables. There's satellites being used. There's a lot of infrastructure that is involved in making the internet work. So similarly, AI cannot become it's not conscious software as is portrayed by a lot of science fiction that is out there, if you understand what I mean. So when we say that AI is going to wreak havoc on the world and things like that, that would mean that there's a organization, it could be a business conglomerate, it could be a country itself, or there's some kind of backing behind it, right? It's not that it has suddenly become conscious and it runs on every machine. That concept is also possible if we build a meta operating system that makes machine work in a specific way. But ideally, in a real world, this is how it would happen. If it is produced by a company or a country, a specific type of software that is running on the masses of machines, that is what people would refer to as AI being crazy. But I don't think we have any.
Yeah, I've heard people reference it to, instead of saying AI is artificial intelligence, it's augmented intelligence. Because it's right now the current stage still has a heavy reliance on human input to keeping it in line, and that's why ChatGPT still has is this good or not?
And to be honest, I don't even consider ChatGPT as a so-called AI. For me, it's more sort of optimized search engine. So, but yeah, it's fine. It's what about? I mean, people are talking that it's AI, but no, it's not.
Yeah, but that's an interesting point. Anything that you understand, it's similar to magic, right?
Yeah.
If you can see something, understand it, you don't stop calling it magic.
Once you see behind the curtain, then it's like, oh, okay, it's not that special.
People have been calling very simple machine learning models part of AI, but now they just call it statistical methods, things like that.
Yeah. Eventually, it just falls into stats.
Yeah, you get disillusioned about how it's working.
I think that's what you mentioned a short moment ago about AI is only able to work within the parameters of the actual creators. So if it does something wrong, it had to had a back end ahead of time by whoever actually created it. But I think what we need to think about going forward is we're basically like enablers of everyone else. So all of us being in technology, and even if we start doing things where we're integrating AI into our solutions, we're kind of like the middleman between the consumers who are actually using our products and us enabling our products with these AI infrastructures that these larger companies are using. We need to think, is there anything that we can put in our solution that still allows us to get our bottom line for the solution, at the same time protect customer data?
Do you think that if the AI engine does something wrong, it should be on the fault of the developer that created it, or to the person that was using it? And as an example, in San Francisco, someone was testing Tesla's autonomous new release, and the car drove into a traffic pole or something like that.
I've seen that.
And they gave the ticket to the person because they were like, well, it's your car.
Right.
But the person was like, well, it was autonomous, so you should give the ticket to Tesla.
But did he not sign a contract or anything? He did, right?
Yeah.
Before testing
If
it,
you,
and he accepted responsibility
Yeah.
for it.
Well, I know, but that's the thing, though. Like the people don't realize that. So I was.
if you ask my opinion, so it should be the person's responsibility. Let's say if you invent a gun, okay, thief has a gun, a police officer also has a gun. So it's how you use it. Okay, I mean you
No,
cannot.
yeah, but in this
hold-
case, they're presenting AI as something that helps you become more efficient, helps you not have to drive, and can do other things. Like the gun manufacturer is not saying here's something that helps you make your life easier, right?
Yeah.
It's a tool. Versus in the people's case, like the person that died in San Francisco as well, fell asleep at the wheel because he thought that the Tesla on their website said that highway autonomous driving was fully level 5, and then there was a truck that was turned over, and Tesla didn't recognize the truck and just drove straight into it.
Yeah, so see, this is the major issue because people think AI is a magician, especially the non-tech people around the
But
world.
the company said it.
Yeah.
So
they
should
are-
the company be
Yeah.
responsible?
I want to add to that. I think this is the other side of the same coin, where we mentioned the first side already. Everybody's trying to plug into AI and it doesn't have enough data. And then here we are being told that it can do this, but I think it has the ability to do autonomous driving, but I don't think we have enough data. It's similar to like how the advent of Google Maps came along, or Waze. It's like as you use those and people report things like this road change or this
Yeah.
business closed, those types of things are things that AI needs enough data to have enough realistic perception of the real world in order to be able to be an autonomous vehicle being able to drive on the road. So
Yeah, but I'm curious about the contract which you mentioned. That company mentioned it. So didn't they have the usual terms and condition asterisk small asterisk mark?
Yeah,
Or
they
it's
did,
complete-
but the problem is that in court, then where it came down to is that on the website, in the marketing material of the company, it said it's full level 5 autonomous driving. But then in the small print, it said it's not. So it's like you can't, that's effectively amounts to false advertising.
So it's like the drinking Red Bull gives you wings.
Yeah. But I mean, like
You're right. You're right. But don't you think that it's about time that everyone, a lot of people should understand how marketing is supposed to look larger than life to incite people to make purchases. This is very common. This is a common trend that happens, and it's about time we realize we woke up to that, especially in the information age. I think we've crossed halfway, and now it's a lot more about disinformation.
Yeah.
Misinformation, right? And then people at this time, they should be aware of what is it that they need to believe in? What is the truth out there? What does it make sense? It makes sense to you. Does it feel right? That building that kind of intuition about what is it that it looks like outwardly and what's it on the inside.
Yeah, well, in the case of autonomous driving, it's a regulated industry, though. So you have to pass, like in California, you have to pass the test before you get the right to label your car at whichever level it is. And so Tesla applied for a level 2 autonomous driving, or not a level 5, but on their marketing, it said level 5. And they were granted a level 2. And so that's where the issue came.
So false marketing.
Yeah. But false marketing going against what you were granted. You were not allowed to say that you were level 5.
Then it's the company's fault.
Yeah. So, I mean,
And even if it's even if it's level 2, so come on, it's like my same code doesn't runs on the next day. So there need to be a rigorous process and some regulations,
Yeah.
so that we can restrict these organizations, because eventually it comes to safety, people's safety. So
yeah, because to your earlier point, sorry for interrupting, but like on healthcare, right? Like so in this situation, it's lives that matter, right? So it's not just as easy as like Facebook break things and move fast, where it's just some pictures on a website. So
I think the reality of the Tesla situation is that they were a level 2 stable, but they advertised their level 5 beta situation. So
yeah.
Right. I want to say that we were talking. You mentioned the solution to you were mentioning about what we would think about the solution to this. So the current problem, I would describe it as in this information age, there's so much being pushed out there, and there's so many consumers of content, be it just for entertainment, be it for educational purposes, or be it for um, professional reasons. And I think there's just so much influx of data, people are now unable to understand what to consume, first of all. And then secondly, they're losing their ability to process all of this data in a structured manner where it's I don't want to use the word sustainable, but where it's assimilated. So they are not able to assimilate this information so that they're able to apply it to improve their lives. I think that's what's happening. So they're in this loop of just running in with the new information, talking about it, spreading this information. There's this loop within the social circles, different social circles. This is going on, and the circles have turned into a circus, effectively. And this is not being helped by the community of professionals and researchers, the industry, the businesses that are running the industry. They're not helping this. There's a lack of awareness that needs to be spread out to help people understand what is going on, what is it that's going on, and whether this is relevant to us or not. People are just chasing after it, regardless of its relevance to our lives, on an individual level, on a social level, and on a global level. I think that's one of the problems. And so a sub-problem would be, even if we are forced, if this is the trend if this is a global trend that we are forced to take part in, do we need to, how do we go about this? Which is the second point that you mentioned earlier, about how do you go about, your data being consumed and all of these things. And that's where the blockchain comes in. And if you guys are ready, I can talk about the solution.
Well, I mean, I'm always down to talk about privacy. And it's not just blockchain, it's like decentralized technologies overall.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, with cryptography being core to it.
Well, there are problems with that as well. So this is the problem of where people talk about whether democracy is the correct way to run a country or not. Are the majority of people having a clear understanding of what is right? If that is the case, then sure, democracy is the right thing, right? Where majority can vote on things. But before that problem comes the problem of awareness. Are they aware of what is happening?
Have they been manipulated?
Or have they been manipulated?
Yeah.
Right. And that's the problem with blockchain. If you have decentralized it, you have decentralized autonomous organizations powering how decisions are being made. One of those decisions has to be, one of those rules has to be how many people can pass a vote. Does it have to be above 50, above 60? And so deciding these rules of what is the percentage of what is the majority that can vote and cause a change.
I mean, blockchains now have also the problem of it's one token, one vote, and you don't know if one token is representing one human or if it's one human has like 1 million tokens, right? And so
of course, but those things can be configured.
Yeah. So I mean, that's why there's like this whole field of like biometric identities and as Vitalik calls it, like soul-bound tokens that links the person to a token that never changes.
Interesting.
Right. And I think blockchain is the only technology right now in the world that's not penetrated yet. I don't know about the future, but considering the PNC it uses in the backend, so as of now till date, it's not penetrable. Okay, so that's why its use cases are very much there in the banks, like for the financial transactions, bitcoins.
Well, I would argue that there are workarounds, and people have lost a lot of money because people have been adjusting their tokens. And
I mean, people lost money through, and I've been in the industry for a while. From in Toronto, from founders of Cosmos and Ethereum, I know them all. It's really the problem in the industry that has arisen over like in 2022 with all those failures and all that stuff, it was because of the infiltration of the centralized technologies. All of the hacks and all of the compromises happen in the bridges, which are centralized servers that just connect to protocols, or roll-ups which just run off of one centralized sequencer, or wallets that are not self-custodian, right? Like where you rely on a developer to store your private keys and your mnemonic phrases. That's where all the failures happen. The blockchains themselves, they don't get compromised, right? So it's all of this ancillary kind of claim that they're trying to bring better user experience but they do it through centralized technologies, where in reality we can get better user experience and better kind of more advanced capabilities than what exists today in Web 2, in Web 3 through cryptography, right? Like through biometrics, through fully kind of self-sovereign identities, and all these elements can exist, and it can be much easier than having to remember a password, because you can have your Face ID and your thumbprint and all these other things connected to the chain and authenticate you really easy and really quickly. But the path of least resistance is what developers would take, and that led them to infusing the whole industry with a lot of centralized tech. And essentially Vitalik, has been talking about that nonstop, of how the industry needs to get rid of all of the centralized stuff in order for us to take that next leap forward. We can't just accept, those things.
Right. And come to think of it, do you think consumers would ever wonder about how these blockchain technologies, the different components and modules that create the blockchain technology, do you think they would ever wonder about where things are being stored? I think the average consumer wouldn't, right? Like you said, there's a centralized aspect to it as well, about where these things are being stored. Do they have all of their personal data on their cell phone, on their personal devices, and it's being encrypted while it's being through the network traffic? These kind of things.
Yeah.
I don't think the average person would think about this.
Yeah,
unless they're convinced. If they're convinced that it's safe, they're going to use it.
Yeah, and code is law in this industry, and that's something that we actually work on, is to enable ease of use when it comes to enabling people to have full choice over where their data is. Like, they don't have to. They can say, I trust the developer, and the developer can make the choice on my behalf. Or or the developer can expose the choices to within the app. So you can say, I want my data backed up to these networks. I want it on my local device. I want it replicated across my devices, and do it all in a privacy preserving way and so that freedom of choice, is coming into the industry, where you have the right to choose where that data is, and then who gets to access it. And that's why I think, to your point of like blockchain and decentralized technologies, can be that layer that ensures that the doomsday scenario of AI doesn't come, because humans can be the stopgap, right? If every human on the planet had the freedom of choose which AI model gets to access which data, rather than Facebook just choosing to give all of the data that's gathered on you to its model, then you can have very interesting and even probably more powerful kind of ways of getting enough data to train them, because you can incentivize people for that, or getting trust to exist in this open, kind of transparent, cryptographically secured way.
I just had a very profound realization. Even if we have blockchain-based, if we have decentralized technology and everyone gets to make a decision, right, on our cell phones about things in governance, about policies, there is still the human social aspect where we can influence each other, right?
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is very important. That is the most important thing, that the foundational layer of how things work.
Yeah.
It's how we form communities. And so I was at the premiere of The Creator, a movie released recently. And it also depicted a dystopian society where the United States has built artificial intelligence. And you can see that these movies and broadcast media, they are talking about, they're spreading awareness about how artificial intelligence will grow into artificial general intelligence and then super intelligence, and how we would have robots, not just static computer machines sitting on your desk, but machines that are able to be mobile. They can move around and think on their own. And humanoid robots, for example, and they are able to influence people also. People begin developing feelings for them. But before all of that can happen, or before people are able to make decisions for themselves and the society on a whole, they are influenced by others, and we have feelings. We talk to each other, we put them out, we get support from people, we build these synergies. I think that's one of the most important parts that we need to work on.
I think that's actually a good point. You got me actually sitting here thinking now. I think what AI would be able to do with just intelligence in general. I know you said what was the second level was artificial general intelligence, yes, and then super intelligence, yes, right? I think for it to get to those stages is, I believe it has to watch every aspect of human life for some period of time in order to train itself. And I think we need to actually start looking at things that way, rather than just worrying about privacy and data and what could be done with it. We also have to look at what data does AI have access to the point that it can influence human emotions, because that is like the real ultimate, end goal or end problem that I actually see. So,
and there is no such infrastructure to regularize this thing. Till now there is no infrastructure so that our emotions and everything, they get stored in a private way, in an anonymous way, like tokenization or anything. There is no standardized regulations for this. So I think in near future, if we have this, then we can talk around this.
So what Ed is saying is that we just need to behave. We need to behave and create the right data. So when artificial intelligence is there, it learns how to perform well.
Yeah, but we have way too many people in our societies that are never going to behave.
I don't even think it's about behaving. I think it's more so about making sure that the system is discarding or ignoring the things that can influence human behavior in the future if enough data is collected. Yeah. So things like health-related data that you were talking about before, those types of things are important to actually collect. So, but if somebody is having a discussion, let's say how we're sitting here now, if certain topics of discussion is being heard by AI through our phones, that can lead to the ability to influence us or people around us if enough data is collected.
It's obvious there are certain things we don't want AI to get through. It's very obvious. Like, for example, if I'm saying I love you to my crush, obviously I don't want AI to hear that. It's my private thing, right?
Yeah.
So there are certain things that it won't pitch into AI, but we need to regularize things,
Yeah. The way I think of like the privacy, or like if I kind of move it towards like, think of it as like a human, like we have all these input sensors, right? Touch and smell and, hearing and visual, obviously. But it all goes into our brains, and then we get to choose, after processing that information, what actually comes out, right? So we keep it private, and we choose through our means of communication what we let out. And so in that sense, the way I think of it is that is probably going to be like the first thing that we should try to emulate, right? It's a replica of how we function as humans, right? With absorb information and then having that choice. But you can even have a personal AI, right? Like your Jarvis, kind of like to reference Iron Man, to essentially do that work for you, right? Like it can be your replica. I don't want to get into the whole conversation of like where technology meets human and how we could become silicon maybe in the future, but that's a topic for another podcast maybe in the future. But yeah, like that's the way I think we should or how I think of it is like emulating how humans function.
In my opinion, as you said, the filtration of the data in the machine. So prior to this stage, as we speak of data, the most important thing is that the data which we give as a training data to AI. So currently there is no 100% proof that the data is fine. So because it is going through cross-functional teams, it is going through various layers. So the data which AI already has, it has many flaws, and out of those flaws, AI is deciding that okay, what to choose. So it's like false positives and
Yeah.
these kind of things. So I
Yeah.
think we are not as of now, we are not in that era, but yeah, eventually we will be there. And speaking of the data, I would like to divert the topic toward the business intelligence, like how it is overhyped. Hype in sense of like AI is hyped in the consumer market. Similarly, business intelligence is overhyped in the industry, the technical world and the industry. It's like majority of the industries, they don't know what's it about. They are just doing it because everyone else is doing it. Okay, and they are spending millions of dollars on that infrastructure.
The
and
blind leading the blind.
Yeah, right. And they are not looking to the right data. For example, there is a very famous example from the World War, like the US bombers when they returned. So they inspected the aircrafts, the damages taken. Okay, so that is the data they are seeing. The most damage they saw that it was in the wings.
Yeah.
Okay, and bottom of the plane. But there was this man, I'm forgetting his name, the analyst, Abraham Wald, I think. So he thought, oh, wait a minute, this is the data we are seeing. But actually, what we are not seeing is the planes which have been hit on the cockpit and the engine. They never came here. So that's the most sensitive part which we are missing. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the data they are not seeing, but the actual decision is made. It is the data which we are not seeing is equally important to the data we are seeing. So similarly, like in UAE, let me see the business in the UAE or in KSA. Like many consumers, in recent years, the usage of mobile phones have increased in KSA. Mm-hmm. Okay, and many analysts, they thought that okay, it's because more people have started using the mobile phones. But this is the correlation, not the causation. Okay, the actual reason was the internet penetration, the tech-savvy population. They in last year, couple of years, they got a very much tech-savvy, because of the hype in the market and everything. And the regulations, the laws, and the access to the internet. So these are the causes. So many companies, they just deep dive into the data and we just need insights. The clients, any clients, they just need it.
But would you say the solution to this is building sort of a domain knowledge about what could be missing out there? How do we think about
like how do you identify the unknown?
How do you identify what is this, what would be the solution?
That's the catch. It's very it's very domain specific. As I gave you the example of that bomber, the like the restaurants in the UAE. I was giving this example of the restaurants in UAE. Some restaurants introduced the halal trade certification and their sales increased. But this is the correlation, okay? The data which they were not looking actually is the advertisement. It directly affects your sales, the food quality, the customer satisfaction. So you need to see the picture as a whole, not at the granular level. You're getting my point? You don't need to ignore the facts.
I think I understand, but I don't understand what would the solution be. Would it be a physics engine that simulates the whole world?
The only thing that popped to my head is how we can see a black hole is we don't see the black hole, we see the things that the black hole creates.
Right.
Yes, the effects.
Right.
And so, I guess maybe...
So the solution to this problem is that not every organization needs business intelligence. They only need common sense to operate. Okay, that's my point. So use your common sense until and unless it's very much required. But they are doing because their clients want. It's a need because of the hype. Okay, so majority of the businesses, they don't require business intelligence. Okay, so I would suggest use just common sense. Okay, use business intelligence when it's required. You're getting my point?
The topic of today's podcast, hype.
This is business advice. This is business advice to all big companies out there. Stop wasting your money.
But do these companies ever think of doing? I mean, as a product developer, you do product market fit testing. You collect feedback and then you iterate. So do they take the data that they have, form a hypothesis, and then test it in the market to see if the hypothesis is correct, to then alter, back,
No,
like with feedback.
So when it all matters, it's about the revenue. When investors are getting their money,
Those pesky investors.
So they are okay. Oh, we are satisfied. We are doing business. We are having Power BI reports. We are taking decisions based on this, and we are getting money. Oh, eventually we are getting the money. Oh, that's all okay, even if it's bullshit.
Got it. So it's a
that's
house
the
of
catch.
cards.
Yeah.
Waiting to collapse.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, one quick question.
Yeah.
If you were to have a cell phone app, and this is based on this question is related to everything we were talking about, data privacy and artificial intelligence. If you had a cell phone app that I told you is on a decentralized network, and everyone in the city, everyone in UAE has this, for example, and this connects to your smart home or your smart residence where you're living, right? And you're able to, have the air conditioning on whenever you come in, have your favorite music play, the lights dim in, the lights turn on and daylight, your alarm, everything is connected to it, and it can just, it knows how to make you feel good. And then it is also connected at your workplace. If you have your own business or if you're working a job, it is able to give you reports of all the things that you need to do, the work that needs to be done, your business, how it's performing, these things. And it's also connected to your city portal, right? So it knows what kind of bills you need to pay, and you're getting points within society about, if you're doing good and things like that. What do you think about such an app?
I mean, it kind of gave me
Go ahead. You go
thoughts
first.
of like the China's score system, which I don't know. I don't think people took it well.
Yeah, I heard about it.
But you can decide where you want to live, where
well, yeah,
who
it
your
would-
neighbors are.
Yeah,
You
if
know.
there was a privacy layer to it, as I said, like where you can prove that this is actually these insights and all of this is happening from my data, but that I get to control which part of my data have access to it, then obviously, no, I don't think anyone would want to say no to something that can essentially be an assistant, right? Effectively, without but yeah, that's a big lift, right? Of like convincing people and proving to people that you are not selling them something that effectively on the other side you're just collecting all this data, and then you're going to these other companies and saying, I know what these people's sleep patterns are. I know what these people's preferences are for XYZ. I know what their medication is. I know what their business is generating as revenue. I know how much they get paid.
Well, but that's only for the governments to understand. For compliance, for policy. See, in the end, it comes down to governance. What if the government is not enforcing these things? Compared to how people are rejected healthcare and all these benefits, if all of this information is being used towards the development of society as a whole, would you guys agree to such a thing?
How would a consumer, trust that, okay, this is the developer, that data is going to be used in the right use
The
manner?
consumer doesn't care about that. They care about the benefits that they're getting and the comfort, the convenience that they're getting.
No, they are consumers.
Well, consumers do care.
Consumers
Like if
do
you go to
care.
Europe,
Not,
Consumer do cares a lot.
but not. Maybe you're thinking from it from a developer point of view, as a data engineer. But the average person does not care so much about, compared to, they might care about it, but when if they have a trade-off with all the security, convenience, the care, comfort, all these things that they're getting, I think they would go for it. What do you think?
To basically kind of like add on to what he said, being into cybersecurity myself, I don't think the level of security is actually there to keep that type of data shielded and protected from like outside prying eyes or somebody basically hacking into that data and using it for nefarious purposes. This also goes back to the reference you made with Iron Man, like having like your own personal assistant, like Jarvis or Friday. I think something like that is possible in the future with the way things are actually hit.
Yeah.
Like especially if you were to bake like protection in there using like crypto. But right now, I think it's still a real gray area for something like that. So we're thinking far into the future for such a solution,
Yeah.
maybe like 10 years from now.
So you guys are gonna force the government to reinforce this.
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm going to force the government. I think, from my perspective, the technology is going to just because I'm working towards that type of technology, that it would just make it impossible for you as a developer to get access to that data without my permission.
Right.
And so that just becomes the foundational layer, and then you can build whatever you want on top of it, but that guarantee is provided by a third party, that's built the technologies for that. Like with smart contracts existing, I know I've spoken to a few teams that, the whole issue of like, if you make data fully private, then how can law enforcement, get access to data that they might need or whatnot. And so some people have kind of started thinking of like smart contracts that then have the ability of like, if it's a court key, effectively, the smart contract can then open certain pieces of data to whatever the court kind of.
No, but I get it depends on how can you convince that person. Does this technology? They're not going to look at the code and all of where it's deployed and all of that, but it's how well you can convince them.
Well, I mean, Apple's convincing them by purposely not giving any data to any government.
Or so they say.
Well, so they say, yeah. Well, so
right.
technically,
It all comes down to that.
any data that's on your phone, Apple has not given. But I've heard from people that Apple has given governments access to their iCloud data.
Right. It's what we choose to believe.
Yeah.
It's how we feel, and how the people around us make us feel about this. Right.
Yeah. No, I fully agree with it. It will eventually evolve to it. But to his point, from a cybersecurity perspective, I would not want to trust your developers and your stack with all of this data. Like if you would have started with like, oh, I'm just going to do this one thing. Like there was a lot of startups that started with like your calendar assistant or like your meeting booking assistant. Sure. But if you now start compiling my home data and then my kids' data and my health data and everything else, that gets into a little too
We're
far.
starting with the calendar.
You can pay,
I want to bring up 2
I
points.
think you can pay.
Go ahead.
People will be motivated if you pay them for the data. This you can try, paying them for their data. Oh, I'm getting paid.
Right.
I think, the other gateway that actually creates risks is the security around IoT in general. It's still playing catch up, especially in the automation realm. And the second part that you probably could start thinking about if you are planning to create such a solution or if you're already developing it is I believe that it would basically have to sit on a framework that's completely closed source, like not just closed source as in code based, but also connectivity wise. Like there shouldn't be any connectivity to the outside world, like a CCTV. And then at the same time, anything that's communicating within the solution itself should also be on its own protocol as well. That's closed source. Just speaking from like a privacy and security perspective.
But yeah,
because there's a lot of private data that would go into that. So somebody would have to basically have like their own personal closed artificial intelligence type. Yeah, personal Google pretty much.
Yeah.
Right, but what I was telling you is that the three of you are biased based on your technical understanding of how things work.
Yeah.
But I think, on the contrary, the average consumer looks at benefits and the value that they're getting. And if a company or organization is able to deliver that value to them, convince them, they will be sold.
Yeah, up until the point that something bad happens with your service, and then they will not use it anymore, right?
And
Like,
that becomes news, actually, because if they're individually affected, they might not even notice until it becomes news that is mass propagated across the world.
So you're trying to scam your consumers.
No, I'm trying to tell you how the world works.
No.
The news will propagate, the shares will drop, things like that. That's what will actually make people be against it, right? If people start talking about it, even people who are not using the platform, they start talking bad about it, they'll be able to influence other people.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, bad news spreads much faster than good news. So
I'm pretty sure the tech giants in Silicon Valley would be in favor of something like this.
yeah.
Right.
I mean, Google has tried to create assistants for a while, but people just don't trust. Google has done so many bad things, or people perceive that they've done so many bad things that no one, like I was talking to Google Cloud people about our tech, and they're having a hard time convincing businesses to load data onto Google Cloud because they think that Google will just ingest that data for themselves. And Google is fighting that perception that exists, from Google ingesting all of the web's data and abusing, doing all kind of abuse, of data throughout the years, that now their cloud team is having a hard time selling to businesses because of that image that they have. And so all it takes is just that, one little thing that happens, that perception shift happens. And then from that point on, you lose those customers, right? And it's going to be easy for, unless you make it really prohibitively difficult for them to leave your platform, because now you control their data and you don't want to, give it away. It's going to, it would be very quickly kind of dropped by people, in my opinion.
There's that entire idea of privacy. And then there's this aspect of sustainability. Can every business afford to have their own machines locally hosted, consuming more electricity, consuming more resources to manufacture all of these things? Or should we rather stick with a cloud where they have developed high-level technology where you can just store everything on there, things like that, but then your privacy is at risk, right?
That's funny that you actually mentioned that. I think it will get to a point where the ability to house your own AI system is going to be possible.
Yeah.
Like what the timeline is, I don't know.
I was going to say the same thing.
And I don't know if y'all seen this before. It's probably like a B-rated movie. It's a movie called, I think it's Dolly.
Dolly.
Oh, yeah, that little...
They
Robot.
had the Intel chip in it that I think it had AI attached to it, but it came from the future.
Animated
I think it will get to a point where it's going to be like that, because even now we got complete computers in our pockets, cell phones. So
I met with a chip manufacturer. I can't name them because we're in talks, but they essentially said for the next 3 years, their entire focus is how to get AI on edge devices. They want it because they make chips for smartphones, for IoTs, for everything. They are pushing and trying to work with teams to essentially get that to exist on their devices. I think there's now a resurgence of like local first software, because companies also have started getting kind of fed up of like the fees that you have to pay to run, the compute in the cloud. There's also the impact to global warming, because if you think about it, if in my pocket I have enough power to compute that, but now I'm wasting energy sending it through the cell towers, through the fiber optics to a cloud to then send it back to me. It happens seamlessly, but all of that took energy. While I could have just computed it on my device, right? And so if you take those other kind of factors, I think a lot of people are starting to think of local first. At least that's been my experience with companies and teams that we're working with, is that they want to start creating more and more local first. And then with the new kind of distributed system technologies that are arising, allow that seamless kind of balancing of the workloads between the edge devices and the cloud kind of compute. So only if you really need it does it send that to the cloud. But that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, and majorly, the government organizations, they are not on the cloud. So mainly because of their privacy reasons and this reason as well, the global warming. So they avoid going to cloud because it can compromise many things. So to my knowledge, no government organization currently, they are not using cloud. They are using...
No, they're using in the US.
Private clouds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also public clouds for different reasons.
No, yeah, like
you're not hosting everything.
AWS has like a dedicated government cloud.
Yeah,
network.
but for the sensitive data, I haven't seen the for government using the
AWS was fighting Microsoft for a CIA contract. So, like, ultimately, if they can prove to the governments that their dedicated cloud server, like provider, like server farms that are just for governments are as secure, and meet all of the governmental standards, it's really what's the difference between a government employee securing that warehouse
but
versus...
your headquarters are in US, so they have government has much control over those organizations.
Yeah.
Like
No, I'm not saying I'm not saying the outside of the U.S. governments would trust
outside
Amazon,
of the US,
but
they won't give to AWS, GCP. I mean, excluding US, like you told me about the CIA. Okay, if any other government is using AWS, what if AWS gives them their data?
yeah,
So
no,
they
I
won't
know,
trust
yeah,
them,
and that's why Europe, for example, is
Yeah.
building. Europe recently, I found out that they decided that Europe is big on utility. So whatever they deem a utility, then that becomes the right of the citizen. So like water, electricity, internet. Now they want to make a EU cloud that every citizen in Europe can have access
Right.
to a like government-backed infrastructure for cloud, so that they don't have to rely on these American entities or foreign entities to provide the cloud infrastructure. That the citizens can have the option of using one
Community data centers.
Yeah, effectively, yeah. And they essentially said that they can let cities spin them up in spare real estate if they want to, and all that kind of stuff to effectively create that mesh cloud network of sorts.
I'm in favor of that.
But on top of that, because of GDPR, EU has then said that only privacy-preserving technologies are allowed to be deployed to this cloud. It has to meet the EU standards. We've touched on privacy quite a bit, and like what I've learned from the people in Europe is that what companies always keep saying is that we don't have the technologies to be able to meet the privacy standards. Not that we don't want to meet them, is that there's no technologies that exist. And so EU has now kind of moved into this space of just funding privacy first technologies. If you go to Berlin, that's all they talk about is how to secure all this data. And that, is where I think, we will go is these technologies will arise to then enable that privacy and that security and create the trust layer, so that then ultimately we can build the Jarvises of the world that you want to create. But it can be that trust layer can exist and provide and be provided kind of by non-profit kind of focused entities and whatnot. No?
I just before we wrap it up, I just wanted to add. Just hearing all the different points of privacy, I think the issue around that, I think ultimately is going to lead to the development of an actual framework or a solution that is privacy itself.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to put it in a technology, it'll be something that'll integrate with everything in between and outside.
Yeah.
So
a base
that's my
layer.
last 2 cents on that. So yeah.
Fully agree with that.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, you're very much welcome.
You're welcome. It's a good discussion, guys. Definitely.